Hello and welcome to a Friday afternoon edition of Puck Talk with Pickens and Turner. I'm Dave Turner along with Pat Pickens. Pat, this is something that we did not expect to be doing right now, but the Anaheim Ducks have not only been bad, but they've been putrid to start the season. The team that I had picked to go to the finals after having a change of heart of them in the offseason. I guess I'm going to eat my crow on that one. Pat, the Ducks, we thought it would go away, and it hasn't yet. Feels like Bruce Boudreau is on borrowed time. What is going on out there in Anaheim?
Yeah, a lot of bad, to say the least, for the Ducks so far. It's hard to say. It's basically the worst possible scenario for the Ducks, and I guess it's not the worst possible scenario. We'll get to that in the Pacific Division later in the show. But if you look at what the Ducks have started, it's been basically a Murphy's Law of just misery. I mean, they've scored just 10 goals in 10 games, which, it doesn't take a rocket science or to figure out that a goal per game is not exactly going to get it done. They had a 3-0 lead on Tuesday against Dallas in Dallas. And, that's basically, they scored 3 goals out of the hop in the first period, kind of playing with some pride. Chances galore, and it looked like maybe that would turn the tide. And then all of a sudden, the Stars rallied, scored 4 straight, 1 in regulation, sent them to their 7th regulation loss and 9th loss. They fell 2-1 in St. Louis on Thursday night, and it's basically been the offense hasn't been there, Dave. You said that, Corey Perry doesn't have a goal yet. Their leading goal scorer is, Hampus Lindholm and Mike Santorelli are tied at 2. Ryan Getzlaf's injured, and they made some really minor decisions in the offseason. They traded Emerson Edom for Carl Hagelin, and Hagelin hasn't done much. I don't know where this perception that Hagelin was this offensive player came from, but he has 2 points in 10 games, and that's about what you're going to get from him. If he's playing on their top line, that could be a problem. So they made some moves throughout the years, the trade of Devontae Smith-Pelly, the trade of Kyle Palmieri, the trade of, Emerson Edom. I mean, if you look what Kyle Palmieri is doing in New Jersey, he's got 7 points in 10 games, 3 goals. That would be leading the Ducks right now. But I think what is interesting about the Ducks right now, and what has almost been camouflaged by this atrocious offensive start, is just how porous they've been defensively. Cam Fowler is really struggling. Kevin Bieksa, who they brought in, is really struggling. They don't have a plus player on their roster right now, and minus 17 goal. I mean, we talked a lot last year, Dave, about the Ducks, and their goal differential was never good, but they're minus 17 goal differential right now. And, Freddie Anderson has been okay, but their defense really is not really helping him in front there. Anton Khudobin, I mean, their goaltending is not the problem right now. They're giving up about 3 goals a game, which is bad, though. But I really think their defense has been a problem. And like I said, it's been kind of like the whole team is a problem. And as good a coach as Bruce Boudreau is, you have to think that they're just keeping him on because they realize they can't do better than him, right?
I guess, but I think at some point they might have to make a move. It's funny how last year, I know you kind of looked at me sometimes like I had 3 heads when I was telling you that I didn't like Anaheim's game.
Mm-hmm.
And, I kind of went against my own word because I did like what I saw from them in the playoffs last year. But here's the thing about this team. Especially with Getzlaf out, but even when he's back and it's him and Perry with someone, maybe Carl Hagelin, that's another thing, actually, is that they can never find someone to consistently play with those two. Kessler's a good player, especially Kessler in the playoffs is a good, shutdown, winning faceoff kind of guy. But my question is, where on this team, outside of Perry and Getzlaf, is this team tough to play against? Like, where do they do things better than anyone else? That's my question. I mean, look, defensively, Hampus Lindholm and Sami Vatanen are 2 young players who we think could be pretty good. Have they shown us that they're that good yet? No. Kevin Bieksa, good player for a while. Nothing great. Is he a top minute kind of guy anymore? Probably
Shutdown
not.
guy.
Yeah, I mean he's good, but and even Cam Fowler, who is finally supposed to be like the number one guy here, isn't showing it. Clayton Stoner, all right, he's a guy who Minnesota certainly didn't feel the need to re-sign him a couple of years ago. And then offensively, again, you're right on Hagelin. He'll show up and give you a highlight reel goal and then do nothing for the 10 games in between. You just look at this roster, and I'm not trying to be negative. I'm not trying to throw the Ducks away because, look, I picked them to go to the finals. But where on this team do you see the talent that even the Kings, who we'll get to in a second here, but where, other than the two players who we know, and then even you want to throw in Ryan Kessler, I just don't see it. I don't know where this team is getting their offensive and defensive production from, because you look at the roster, it's a bunch of younger maybes and guys who are possibly past their prime, like a Sean Horkoff and a Bieksa and people like that.
It's interesting, though, because when they were winning, this was a team where you'd say, well, look at how versatile each player is. You could slot a guy like Andrew Cogliano on their top line, and then all of a sudden he's down to their fourth line. They had Devontae Smith-Pelly, who played with Perry and Getzlaf in the playoffs in Dallas in that playoff series. And then, last year he's playing third and fourth line minutes. So, they had that kind of dichotomy where when it's going well, they could slot guys, here and there and everywhere. And it's, and now, like you said, when it's going badly, you say, well, here's this bunch of players who are, sort of good. And I really think Getzlaf being out and being off to this inconsistent start is really affecting everybody. That's the leader of their room. When things don't go well, you look to a guy like that to kind of, he's a real leader. He can lead physically. He can lead on the scoreboard. He can lead. He's a great two-way player. And I just think that, they're really missing him right now when times go bad, you look to your captain for leadership and for guidance. And if you don't have your captain, it's kind of hard to right the ship, if you will, to continue that analogy. But there's a bunch of guys who just aren't producing. Patrick Maroon, where's he been? 1 point. Chris Stewart, no points. They bring him over. They think he kind of fits that heavy, hard forecheck style, and he hasn't done it yet. So Jakob Silverberg, who's kind of one of those in between players, that second or third line guy. 1 point in 10 games. I still get the vibe that this team's going to turn it around, only because their goaltending is really good and their defense, much to the chagrin of everybody, is playing much worse than it should be right now. I really think they're going to get it turned around, especially, like I said, we'll get to the division in a minute. It's a disaster. But 4 points in 10 games, they're digging themselves a heck of a hole here.
Yeah, I just don't know if they have the talent to get out of this. I think the biggest thing about the Ducks last year, they're a heavy team. They're a scrappy team. And look, they beat Calgary, who, okay, they were a good upstart team, but they're young and they weren't ready for that. And look what they're doing now. Really, what have the Ducks, especially if you look at last year and now this year, what have the Ducks really done that impresses you? And look, they lost a lot of pieces from last year that were parts of that team that mattered. Kyle Palmieri wasn't a barn burner, with a 60-point kind of output, but he was a good player. And even Edom, who was a big body, kind of seemed to fit them. And then you want to say that Francois Beauchemin is a big loss, sure, because he was the elder statesman on that blue line for them.
Yeah,
he was the guy that ate up minutes. And you know what? Sometimes when you have to reallocate your minutes to different guys, it changes the way things go. Because here's another thing to look at also is, the Getzlaf line, if they're out there and they're having too much time in their own defensive zone because of the inability for the defense to really do something, it's going to take away from their offense. And then teams are going to be like, all right, well, we're going to roll our, we're not going to have to try to negate the it's the kind of thing where they can just go out there and run their first line and just beat them. And then that's what scares me about the Ducks right now is I just don't see where on this roster, they're all of a sudden going to turn it on and be great. Are they a playoff team in that division? Yeah. But after that, I don't know if you can expect them to beat the Kings even this year.
I don't know either. But Dave, speaking of the Kings, we're gonna head 25 miles or so up the I-5, which basically might as well feel like the other part of the other side of the moon here at this point right now. You know, we've been tough on the Kings basically the last 2 years, but things are starting to look rosy in LA. 6 straight wins. They've given up 2 goals a game. Their goal differential is only +2, but the Kings are atop the Pacific Division in their rightful spot. Dave, go ahead, laud the Kings.
Yeah, I'll do it. It's so funny with this team because it's like the Ducks and the Kings are like a soap opera, which is funny because of where they're located.
They're like step brother and sister.
Yeah, and I mean you want to throw the Sharks in there too, and it really is. It's a daytime drama. It really is. I mean, but the Kings are starting to play good hockey now, and I guess it's something that we should have expected from them. Jonathan Quick, who was struggling early, all of a sudden has a 2 goals against and a .928 save percentage. They've been really, they've gotten it good going defensively. Tyler Toffoli, 7 goals and an assist. He's looked good, and even Jeff Carter, who's always like Mr. Goal First, is actually 3 goals and 6 assists. Drew Doughty starting to come around. He wasn't exactly playing great hockey, and I saw people really down on him to start the year, where he was their preseason Norris Trophy pick, and all of a sudden it's no, there's no way Doughty is playing any good hockey right now. But again, that's why you can't overreact too much, and I think we're seeing the Kings certainly assert the fact that they're going to be a playoff team this year.
Yeah.
Pat, I mean, look, is there anyone in that division that, let alone might beat them for the division crown, but I can't see there's any way that they don't finish top 3 just because they've righted the ship enough defensively. I don't know if this team is great. I don't know if they have the ability necessarily to go on some of the runs that they've had to win cups. But look, Milan Lucic comes in. He's been pretty good. Kopitar, he hasn't gotten going yet, but if he does, that makes him that much more dangerous. The Kings are going to be right there. There's no doubt.
I think this team, like most good teams, begin and end with defense. And we killed Jonathan Quick. We killed Daryl Sutter. We said, hey, this guy doesn't, he wears people out. And what? They gave up 12 goals in their first 3 games. They've given up 6 since. I mean, you mentioned Jonathan Quick. Jonathan Quick was the 3rd star of the week this past week, where he was 3rd star behind Markov and Kuznetsov. He had given up, he was .971 save percentage and a shutout of Carolina in that stretch, and a 40 shot save shutout of Carolina, not like the 15 save variety that some goalies get. Quick's been great. You know what I think we have to guard against, where the Kings have to guard against here in terms of, is obviously the complacency, is because things go well for a stretch, they turn it on, and then they sleepwalk through the next stretch of games, and then all of a sudden it's like, well, we got to turn it back on. And last year they got bitten by it. And you wonder if they can just continue to do this. Like you mentioned the division. We've talked about the division a little bit, alluding to it. But it's awful. And they should be the class of it. And they should not have a problem rolling through it. But, they're 3-0 away from the Staples Center, too, which is a little interesting. It's almost as if they got that road trip and they said, hey, let's go here a little bit. Winning games. They won games in San Jose. They won a game at Rexall this week. Not exactly hardened competition. They went to Winnipeg though and won. But we got to give the Kings their due because we were so tough on Daryl Sutter. We were so tough on the team, and it's still early, so there's a long time. I mean, Tyler Toffoli has a 31.8 shooting percentage, Dave. I mean, that really is not sustainable at all. But they've got, this is the team to be could be the Western Conference, certainly the Pacific Division. So you got to give them some love there, especially when they win 6 games in a row.
Yeah, it's interesting how, just a little sidebar here, how the divisions are shaping up, that you would hope that the balance in the divisions will never let you say, oh, it's unfair that a team from so-and-so division guarantees themselves, or at least 3 of those teams have a chance there. Because, but granted, who knows? The 5th team in the Central might end up in the conference finals this year, for all we know. But
winning the Pacific Division.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. The Winnipeg Jets could win the Pacific Division playoffs this year.
They hang a banner up there. That'd be nice for the people of Winnipeg. They can
what are they, the Indianapolis Colts now? Did you? I don't know how much football that you get to see, Pat. But did you see what the Colts did with that? I sure hope that doesn't start happening in the NHL.
The AFC finalist, right?
Yeah, I mean, like, what is that going to be like having? I don't know, for
the division championship banners for. The regular season division championship banners. I mean, I think it happens in other places. There are a lot of places where winning has not exactly come easy. Especially, you look at that Western Conference where you say teams like Vancouver or teams like San Jose or teams like Anaheim. I mean, I guess Anaheim has a cup final and a Stanley Cup. It's amazing how that wasn't that long ago, the Ducks Stanley Cup, because we all fashioned them the choke artists. Yet, they've won a title since the lockout.
That feels like such a long time ago, though. It's funny that it is after the lockout, but oh my God, it feels like forever. But speaking of one team that hasn't won in actually almost forever, well, more than forever, and a team that's never won, the Dallas Stars and the Nashville Predators, doing things in very different ways, but playing really, really good hockey. Pat, if you had to pick one of these two teams who they're both off to good starts, but which of these teams is primed for a deep run? They're probably both playoff teams at this point, let's be honest. But who do you think of these two teams that's really come out strong has the ability to make a deep run and maybe even find themselves as the Western Conference champion?
I'm going to pick Dallas because, Jamie Benn is a superstar, and maybe he doesn't get the credit he deserves playing amongst Tyler Seguin and some of the other guys down, Patrick Sharp down there. It feels like they really, everybody makes fun of Jim Nill winning the off season every year. And it's true. We pundits and writers and people around the sport love to give credit to Jim Nill before he wins anything. But man, some of these additions he made this past offseason are just looking downright fantastic. I mean, you look at Patrick Sharp scores a huge goal Thursday night in a comeback win, home win. You look at, Johnny Oduya's kind of righted that defensive ship down there. They're resilient, but you look at the top of the points too. Ben and Seguin playing together, 31 combined for 31 points so far in Dallas's games. And I really think, though, that, we all know this is a run-and-gun, fast-paced, excitable team that's going to get up and down, it's going to score goals. Goal scoring likely will not be a problem for the Dallas Stars. But you look at what Anthony Niemi's doing, you're kind of shoring up that goaltending position. 917 save percentage thus far in 7 starts. Not great, but he's not giving up porously allowing goals like Kerry Lettinen is. We saw that in Minnesota last year, how a good team can be basically sabotaged by bad goaltending. And if you want, they probably need a 9-10 goalie to be really, really good. And if Niemi's going to be 9-7, some of the saves he made a couple big stops on Thursday night against Vancouver. And they got them to overtime, and then they won the game in overtime. So I think, you look at how this team – and John Klingberg looks like a legit star on their blue line, playing alongside Alex Goligoski. 2 goals, 7 assists, power play minutes. He's got 3 power play points already from the blue line. They have, Hemsky producing 6 assists. Patrick Sharp has 3 goals. Plus they have Spezza, who's got 5 goals and 5 assists. They're going to put up points. They're going to put up goals. And if they're good enough defensively, which it seems like the addition of Oduya, and don't forget that they have a surplus and a glut of talent down in the American League that's just kind of finding its way in, that Matthias Janmark, and we talked about Klingberg. And these are guys that were AHL champions, the Calder Cup champions 2 years ago. and they're kind of just filling out that roster nicely with the rest of the superstars. And if Niemi's going to play this well all year, they might win the Central Division in the regular season.
Yeah, I mean, I'm certainly not going to say that I wouldn't be able to give you a fight for Dallas here, but for me, the answer is Nashville. Though this team last year, they played Chicago, the eventual Stanley Cup champion, in a pretty good series. That if they didn't lose their mainstay in Shea Weber, I don't know if that series doesn't change. You know, people kind of just assumed that Nashville was like an also-ran last year, even though they had a really good regular season. Mm-hmm. And I think this year you're seeing a team that is doing it in a way that really no one else is doing it, where they're not a team that's going to fly up and down the ice in terms of the way their offense is run, but they do it with having really, really mobile defensemen. I've said this for a while. I've said it on the show too. I think Roman Josi is the most underrated player in the entire league. I think that if he was a number one in a big market, everyone would be talking about him. And also in Shea Weber, we know what we get from him, and I think that Seth Jones is getting better every single night. You're starting to see him get to the, I think he's starting to mature enough that you're seeing him become a legitimate player in this league now. And look, they're not a team that's going to blow your doors off scoring. But the defense and the goaltending is there, and they win because of that. And especially because, Pat, you said it before about with the Ducks. That's what it takes. And Pekka Rinne did struggle down the stretch last year, maybe coming off the injury. He played too many games. But I like the coaching with Peter Laviolette. I think this is a team that has, you want to talk about the recipe of being good from the net out. I don't think there's anyone who embodies that better than the Nashville Predators right now.
Yeah, there's a lot of basically anonymous names there. I mean, Mike Ribeiro's off to a fantastic start again this year. But my only concern with Nashville becomes, is there enough offense? As opposed to Dallas, where, you ask the question, is there enough defense in Dallas? And the moves they made have kind of shored that up with the emergence of Klingberg and the addition of Oduya. A couple of, they have an offensive guy there to play with Goligoski, the shutdown guy, and then they added a shutdown guy in Oduya. You just wonder if Nashville because that's where the well ran dry last year, was in the offensive side against Chicago. And I agree, losing your best defenseman is a huge deal. And they played tooth and nail with the Blackhawks right down there to the end. But you just they kind of ran out of gas down the stretch, and you just wonder if there is enough there, especially offensively, to carry them throughout an 82-game season.
Yeah, that is a good question. And I think to maybe answer for both of us here, if Dallas finds a little more defense and the Nashville Predators find a little bit more offense, these two teams could be playing for a chance to go to the conference finals, or possibly, if things shake out differently, they could even see each other in the conference finals. I think maybe the consensus should be that both of these teams are playoff teams, that if they can keep it going and maybe find what ailed them last year, both these teams could be very dangerous. I think that's the biggest takeaway.
I think they're also two very well-run teams. When you look at from the organization of, David Poile in Nashville, does whatever it takes to get his team. And you mentioned Laviolette's a fantastic coach, experienced, won a Stanley Cup, been to the Cup Finals a second time. And you look at, Dallas too, with Lindy Ruff.
He's a good coach.
Yeah, fantastic coach. It seems like he's embraced that system where they can play a little fast and loose, but then also, keep enough out of their goal to win games. So I think they both have staying power. I think they're both going to be high-end playoff teams come April.
Yeah, no doubt. It's going to be interesting to see how that division unfolds, because every night, you want to talk about the Pacific Division being a daytime drama, a soap opera, if you will. Yeah. The Central is like an epic miniseries where every single night is a good one. I mean, I don't know why I'm equating the hockey teams to types of television, but I guess that's where we're going today.
Yeah, I guess. Who knows? But we're going to go to I think we're going to transform to the positivity. We've been doing a lot of negative stuff here in the beginning here. Dave, let's go a little positive here with our pluses start. and then we'll go back to killing teams again. I'm going to start my first plus is going to be Pascal Dupuis. Just a phenomenal story, heartbreaking in some cases where he tore his ACL a couple years ago, and then trying to rebound from that, he suffered from blood clots in his lungs last year and missed the whole season. You could read the heartbreaking story, his first person narrative on Players Tribune. If you haven't read any of his stuff, you probably should, just because it's so it's inspiring and exciting and heartbreaking in some cases. But Dupuis scored his first goal back on the ice since since early 2014 on Thursday night against Buffalo. He's playing with Sid Crosby again. He's one of the best guys in the sport. And if you can't root for that guy, then you shouldn't be watching hockey. And also, Dave, while we're on the Penguins, all of a sudden they've finding themselves here a little bit. 3 wins in 3 straight games. Kessel and Malkin look like a machine together. Malkin has 5 points. He had 2-point effort in an overtime win against Nashville, or in Nashville Saturday night. He had 2 more points in a win over Buffalo Thursday. With the Metro in flux, Pittsburgh seems to be finding itself, kind of making that a 4-team race there.
Yeah, I do think they're going to reinsert themselves. There is too much talent on this team. But I still think that there are I think they could be better than the Islanders, because I think the Islanders have gotten off to a really good start. But I still want to see them take that next step over the course of a season in the playoffs before I really put them there. But to me, that division still, though, the Rangers and the Capitals are the class of that division, just because I think both teams are better than they were last year even, and they've been there before.
Yeah.
Over the Islanders, at least, and the Penguins, I think, have to kind of show that they can get back to where they were. I mean, now they're the team that's chasing. For years and years, it was the Rangers and the Capitals trying to chase the Penguins.
Yeah,
and now it's the other way around, which is interesting. But
especially since the defense has been there, goaltending's been there. 20 goals allowed in 10 games. So only 24 though only 20 scored in 10 games. Not great. So, but yeah, something to keep an eye on there.
Yeah. For me, my plus is going to be Michael Hutchinson. And I get it that they want to play Andrei Pavlik.
Why?
I don't know why. I understand it, because he was someone who was their guy for a while. But Michael Hutchinson, I mean, the guy, he's played 4 games this year, and he's been good in pretty much all of them except for one. And his numbers last year were good. I just like what I see from this guy. I've watched a couple Jet games when he's played, and not even so much the stats, but I like the way that the guy plays the game. And sure, Pavlik's been decent so far this year. He's got a 918 save percentage. Okay.
Good.
6'9". Yeah, good, but not great. But Michael Hutchinson, I mean, he came in, he shut down the Devils, who turns out the Devils can actually score a couple goals. The Rangers can certainly score, and he shut them down. And then he went and shut down Chicago. He made 45 saves and gave up 1 goal. I think he's a guy who, much as, you've heard me talk about Jake Allen, where I think that these young goaltenders need to be the guy for these teams. Even you want to talk about Anderson and Anaheim. I think the new crop of goalies, when you've failed with other goaltenders before, has to be the difference. I think Hutchinson's been playing very well. And that being said, I think that this team's a playoff team if they get good goaltending, and he might be the guy. Look for the Jets to have another whiteout coming.
I was going to say, especially since they're giving up the most shots allowed per game. They're giving up something like 34 shots allowed a game. And I know Hutchinson, you mentioned the save totals in those spots. If they're making stops, and I would agree with you, they're a playoff team. My second plus is going to go to a nemesis to we in the media, is going to be John Tortorella. He came in, they finally took a lead in his first game, but lost. Since taking over, John Tortorella is 2-1 behind the bench in Columbus. He's going to get some flack, and deservedly so, for questioning Ryan Johansson's fitness when Johansson's clearly sick. But it seems like they've at least developed some structure in front of him. Tuesday night in a game in New Jersey, they weathered a barrage of shots, especially in the first period. and got 23 saves from Sergei. They scored the game's first 3 goals, kind of withstood the onslaught, which is a little bizarre to say that the Devils can be an onslaught towards anyone. But 23 stops from Sergei Bobrovsky. They've won 2 games in a row now all of a sudden, and they've still got a long way to go to even get back into the out of the basement in the Metro, because Carolina looks much improved. But maybe we're starting to see it here a little bit from Columbus under Tortorella. It's not good to see that Brandon Saad is sick a little bit. Plus, they've got a pretty hellacious stretch of games coming up where they play Winnipeg, I think they play Washington, and then they go to the West Coast for games against the Kings and Sharks and Ducks and Coyotes coming up here. So there's some tough games for them coming up. They go at Washington, home Winnipeg, in San Jose, in LA, in Anaheim, home Vancouver, and then Pittsburgh and Arizona over the next basically 2 weeks. But good for John Tortorella for kind of riding that ship a little bit, and maybe this team finds itself with a big road trip coming up.
Yeah, that'll be interesting to see how that happens. But I don't know. I think the biggest thing that I've found so far about this season is that there's been so many ups and downs with some of these teams and even some of these players that I think you just kind of have to let it breathe. Like, It's funny how the Devils now all of a sudden look like a team that looks pretty good. Columbus, I do think is going to turn it around. I do, because I like Tortorella, and I think that this team definitely has more talent than they were showing. But
yeah.
The biggest thing is that, let's get 30 games into it. I always say the new year is my point where I start to get me
judge teams.
Yeah, get me above water, with your head above water through December, and then make your move, or sink or swim, that kind of thing. For me, though,
look how many coaches get fired before that, or right around that time, because like you said, it's a good measuring stick.
Yeah, and I think firing a coach so early is tough because you look at, all right, so say you start 1-7-1 or whatever, or 0-8, Columbus style or whatever. But if that happens in the middle of a season after you've won a few games, you probably don't get fired. Just because it's different when there's no numbers in the correct column to start the year. But speaking of numbers and correct columns, he had a good playoff last year, and he's really starting to come into his own. Evgeny Kuznetsov of the Washington Capitals, one of the stars of the league last week. And for good reason, because he's been fantastic. This is a kid that is just really turning into a great player. And all of a sudden, the Washington Capitals are a deep team. Defensively, they're pretty good. They've got a great goaltender. I happen to really like Braden Holtby. And this is a team that looks really, really dangerous. And some of it is because of the play of Evgeny Kuznetsov, who's got 4 goals and 8 assists. He's got 12 points already. He's a guy who I think has taken that 7. And mind you, they've played 8 games too, so he's got 12 points in 8 games. I don't know if that's gonna last, but even just the fact that he's come out and played this well so far, I think just gives them another weapon to have on this team. I mean, everything was about, TJ Oshie is going to come in and be a difference maker, but so far he's been okay. I don't know if Oshie has been, going, really, being the guy who was the sweetheart of the Olympics a few years ago. Mm-hmm. It's Kuznetsov playing with Ovechkin, and Oshie. Okay, great. But now what it does is it puts Backstrom somewhere else too, and Marcus Johansson, another guy who's young or younger and playing pretty well. Look, I know you like this team. I like this team too, especially with a guy who you saw him score some really big goals in the playoffs last year, Kuznetsov. And I think that he is just turning into a guy who's going to be the kind of player that can put this team over the hump and maybe help them win what's going to be the inevitable series against the Rangers.
Answer me this, Dave. Where are the Capitals flawed right now?
That's a real good question.
I mean, if Alexander Ovechkin's not oversleeping, if his alarm clock's working, they're a pretty dangerous 3-line team. and their defense is really good, and they're
Yeah,
really well coached.
Maybe
and their goaltending is really good.
Yeah, maybe their third defensive pairing, but Dmitry Orlov, before he got hurt last year, was a guy who they felt really good about, and he's been pretty good since he came back. So,
they can get on you. They allocate the ice time really well. I think is important because I mean, you look at their fourth line guys play about 12 or 13 minutes a night, which especially early on here is important when you get to the opportunity to, because deeper in the season, the deeper you go, the minutes wear on the big players. I mean, John Carlson's been a star basically to start this year, especially offensively. Defensively, I think they're a little suspect still defensively. When you look at Brooks Orpik's not that great, and Carlson's kind of an anchor there on Carlson. But honestly, every team is flawed. I think Washington's just the least flawed. But it's interesting. It'll be interesting to see whether that loss at home against Pittsburgh on Wednesday night serves as an emotional letdown for them. I think it's interesting though because you said, and I think what's most remarkable about their start thus far is they've already gone on a Western road trip. They won in Vancouver. They won in Edmonton. So, I mean, a couple of their wins are maybe that's why they got some of those wins because they're playing West Pacific Division opponents. Wins over San Jose and a win over Vancouver. I'm sorry, a loss. One of their losses was San Jose, but they played San Jose. So, they played San Jose, they played Vancouver, they played Edmonton. And all of a sudden, like you said, though, it's remarkable that they have 12 points, 6 wins in just 8 games. Haven't yet, 8 games is tied for the fewest among all teams.
Yeah, so I mean, they're going to obviously have a couple weeks coming up that they're going to make up some games because there's some teams that have 11 played right now.
Yeah.
It's funny how we bookend the show by talking about how bad one of my Stanley Cup Finals picks looks and maybe how good the other one looks.
Yeah. I've been in that same boat where Montreal has been the darling so far, and then Calgary. I kind of don't want to get into that, but for my first minus, while we're going negative, I'm going to pick the Ottawa Senators defense. Let's start, by the way, by saying that their young players are really, really good. They're young forwards. When you look at Hoffman, Stone, Turris, these guys are having huge years. Bobby Ryan, a little bit resurgent so far, but they've given up 30 goals thus far through only 9 games. That's really bad. And the goals against are only better than Columbus and Buffalo in the Eastern Conference. They have the 9th worst Corsi percentage in the entire sport, and they're giving up the 2nd most shots. They're giving up roughly 33 1/3 shots. I know you can't get a third of a shot in a game, but that's an average. Erik Karlsson came out on Thursday and basically killed the idea of 3-on-3 overtime. He says they haven't won it. It hasn't resulted in a win for them yet. They played 4 shootouts already, which is by far the most of a team in the entire league right now. But if this team, if he really wants to he can get on the overtime, whatever. That's fine. It's his prerogative. But if this team's going to go somewhere in the Atlantic Division, which by the way is wide open right now, beyond that top spot, I mean they've got to shore it up. Where would this team be if not for Craig Anderson? Craig Anderson and his .914 save percentage thus far, they would be. We'd be talking about them as one of the worst teams in the league, probably.
Yeah, I think they kind of just got hot last year, and we're seeing them fall back. I mean, of course, the
offense is really good, though.
Yeah. I mean, they have a lot of young guys, but even Bobby Ryan isn't even like nearly the best offensive player on that team. Perhaps
no.
Kyle Turris. I know we talked about him a couple weeks ago. He's really seeming like he's turning into the guy that maybe Phoenix at the time, now Arizona, didn't think he could be. But yeah, I think for them it's going to be tough because Detroit will come around. Buffalo certainly could start to put it together. I don't see them as a playoff team. But for me, I'm going to stick for the team as well for a minus. Not that I don't expect them to be a playoff team. I think they're a shoo-in for the number 2 seed in that division. The Tampa Bay Lightning have not looked great. And I don't know if it's a little bit of a hangover. I mean, they had a lot of young guys who have never played nearly the amount of games that they played last year. Maybe it's them just being smart. Maybe it's them learning from the team that beat them in the Stanley Cup Finals, because we've seen Chicago do this. How many times have we seen Chicago in the year that they've won the Cup after the first recent one they won, where they're kind of just hanging around for a while, and all of a sudden they flip the switch and they just go on that run, and then they finish somewhere in the playoffs and say, okay, let's go to war. Maybe that's the case for Tampa, but they haven't looked great. The thing that scares me about them is the Stamkos thing is kind of
looming,
floating ahead. Yeah, and I don't know if that's going to be a problem or not, but he could be gone as early as next year.
Or the trade deadline even.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it'll go that far.
I would agree with you.
It's not out of the question. It's not. If they think that they can get something for him instead of just letting him walk, they might do it. I think this team will be fine because I love the coaching. I think Cooper is just a tremendous coach. And, maybe this team is being smart and they're just, biding their time, and they know the quality of the division they're in. And there's no sense to go out and try to put 6 goals on someone every single night, and just keep your head above water and get it going. But so far, Tampa Bay, they got shut out against the Blues the other day. They have not looked like the team that was looked like they were the class of the Eastern Conference last year. I just haven't seen it from them, and though it might change right now, they've not given you much to think that they might not have a little bit of a hangover from the Cup Finals.
I think there's some merit to that, especially when you factor in 2-1 loss to the Avalanche on Thursday night. That's inexplicable. I mean, maybe Semyon Varlamov stood on his head 34 stops in that game, but you can't be losing games, especially on home ice when you play in Colorado. That's you gotta win the games you're supposed to. And I agree, there may be a hangover there because you talk about you mentioned Cooper. I talked to him at the end of the Eastern Conference Final last year, and he said they got so sky high for the Rangers and for the Canadiens last year, and every team's getting that way for them this year, and maybe they're just not ready to take that punch yet.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, when you're the hunted, not the hunter, it's a little bit of a different situation. And they almost have to learn how to navigate a different season this year. That's all my sayings on playoffs and winning and how to learn to win and lose. But I think for them that they kind of might have to just feel their way a little bit again this year and realize that they're the hot ticket. They're the team people are getting up for on their schedule and that sort of thing. And look, I think they'll be fine, but right now they certainly are not giving you a lot to think that they are at least to the level that they were last year so far.
I agree. So we'll move back out west for my second minus to the Pacific Division. Quick, Dave, without looking, how many Pacific Division teams have a plus goal differential?
I'm going to say 1.
It's 3.
Okay.
3 is the correct answer. But it's really – the Pacific Division is a disaster right now because Calgary's giving up 4 goals a game, and they're not in last place. They're second to last. The Oilers might be the most fun team to watch in the entire division. Maybe, one of the better teams in the entire sport. And they're in 5th place in the division. The Sharks were 4-0. They're 1-4 since. The Coyotes are all of a sudden -1 in goal differential. And by the way, they're in a playoff spot right now. The Coyotes still 10 games into the season. The Canucks have 4 overtime losses and are tied for first place. And the division leader, LA, we talked so highly about them at the start. They wouldn't even be in a playoff spot in the Central Division right now. If you went back, if you flipped the Blackhawks, or they have 12 points, would be good enough for 6th place in the division right now, in the Central Division right now. The Pacific is a disaster. And everybody was talking about, Anaheim's so great, potential cup winner. Calgary's so good, darling upstart. LA will rebound. And, San Jose, new coach, new system, new goalie, etc. And all of a sudden, this division looks like a nightmare. It looks like the Metro 2 years ago, where, no one really asserted itself. And, I mean, ultimately that division rebounded and everything was fine. But, I mean, are the Coyotes going to hang in this just because of the division they're in? I mean, people thought Vancouver would be in a position for Austin Matthews and now all of a sudden they're banking points. They're tied for first place. I mean, I think you look at the division and you say there's probably one good team in LA right now. And you look at where, you read some of the things that people are talking about Columbus, where, their season is – the relevance of their season is over. And Anaheim's in the same boat. And Calgary's in the same boat right now. So who are going to be the playoff teams out of the Pacific Division? And really, who deserves to be a playoff team out of the Pacific Division besides LA? I mean, we might as well just let all 7 Central teams in and just throw the Kings in there for good measure. And the Avalanche are horrible. And the Avalanche would probably finish second in the Pacific Division right now. San Jose, I like their goaltending. I like their personnel. They're missing Logan Couture. They're going to get him back soon, and they'll probably get back into this. But you cannot tell me that the Coyotes are going to be a playoff team just because they finished third place in the Pacific with 85 points or 81 points. This is absurd. I mean, you can make the case that the Oilers are going to get back into it, and that the Oilers probably are the third best team in that division right now.
You know what? I actually might agree with you on the Oilers. I do think that at some point, I've said kind of to rehash what I said, Connor McDavid is going to carry the Oilers kicking and screaming into the playoffs.
They might even be this year, though.
I know, because he's been so good, and this division is so bad.
You're going to get Jordan Eberle back too. I mean, who knows? Mm-hmm. They're going to have 3 lines. I mean, Draisaitl scored 2 goals in his first game up. That guy was a former first-round pick. Yeah. I mean, why not? Make a case for Dave. Who's going to be the second and third seed in the Pacific Division right now? And I know it's early. You said it before. I'll give you that. Like you said, take till January 1st. But really, who of these teams is deserving of a playoff spot?
Right now, other than maybe the Kings, none of them, because you look at the hockey that's played in the other the other division in the conference, and it's like night and day. But you know what, though? That's the beauty of the long season, is that right now we're looking at someone and saying, oh my God, they're so bad. What if the Oilers go out and win 21 of the next 32 games? And all of a sudden they look so good, and they're the darling of the years before.
What if the Ducks do that?
I mean, they could, yeah, of course. And then all of a sudden, we're not saying that Anaheim's so bad. I think that's the biggest thing about this division is, yes, it's clearly inferior. Even at its best, it's still very much inferior to the Central. But I think it's so wide open right now that any of those teams could find themselves back into it. Even Calgary, who we both really like, but they've been making us look stupid, they can get back into it too.
You can make the case that the Pacific is as compelling as the Central, whereas the Central is the behemoths, and the Pacific is just the kids beating each other up in the schoolyard, where every team's in it sort of, and the Central's the heroes and the tough big giants in the Central Division, and then the Pacific's as competitive. They're just not as good, and 3 teams are going to get in because of geography. So I mean, it has all evened itself out in the past, and I have no reason to believe it won't in the future. But right now, let's go Pacific Division.
Yeah, it really has been fascinating. But you know what, though? I almost think that we're going to probably be saying the same thing about the Atlantic Division at some point too, because other than, I think Tampa will be fine, but I think that the team who falls into the 3rd spot in that division is going to be another team that you look at it and you say, really? Because there might be 5-6 teams out of the Metropolitan that could possibly do it if someone like the Devils actually hangs around long enough, or even Carolina has shown some really nice signs, to be honest. But look, that's why they play the games, and that's why it's Halloween. So as spooky as things might be right now, the fact is that there's a lot of time left, and you know what? I can't wait, because it seems like as much as the regular season was boring last year, I feel like every single week now there's a new storyline, and it's been fun.
Yeah. What are you looking forward to, Dave?
Oh, that's a good question. I really haven't taken a look at too much for the schedule for next week yet, because we are on Friday when we're recording this. But yeah. I think for me, it's just Connor McDavid every night at this point. I mean, I've been watching every game he plays, or at least the highlights, if I can, the day after.
Yeah.
And look, Jack Eichel's been good, and Jack Eichel's going to be a great player, but McDavid now is just in this realm where you're seeing greatness begin. And it's great for the league.
He's a superstar now. I mean,
Yeah.
you look at he plays in all zones. He's got 12 points already. So he's a superstar now. I'm going to say, and get ready for this one, Dave. Buckle up, because it's our first Kings and Blackhawks game of the season on Monday night in Chicago. So those games, if you recall, the last basically, I guess, 3 seasons, basically since the Kings won their first Stanley Cup, those games have been epic, knockdown, drag-out wars. Monday night's game is on NHL Network. It's at United Center. And usually there's a lot of goals. There's a lot of back and forth, great goaltending or good goaltending. We can get on Crawford and Quick, but Kings and Blackhawks Monday night is going to be a doozy. And oh, by the way, the next night in New York, the Capitals make their first trip to Madison Square Garden since that epic Game 7 overtime in the second round last year. So you mentioned the Capitals trying to unseat the Penguins chasing the Capitals and Rangers. Those two are probably the class of the entire Eastern Conference. Well, maybe 2 of the 3 in the entire Eastern Conference. So keep your eyes peeled for Caps and Rangers. Those 2 teams don't really had a physical and just exhausting series, and Caps are probably going to want some revenge.
Yeah, there's some good games coming up, that's for sure. It's going to be fun. All right, Pat, I think that'll pretty much wrap it up for today. We will be back next week with more as the world of NHL hockey turns. No, I'm just kidding. I'm Dave Turner along with Pat Pickens. I will stop making terrible TV-related jokes for next week. Have a good one, everybody.